Thank you all so much for joining, and welcome to our virtual meetup where we're going to be covering how to navigate COVID-19. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Shelly Grumet and I'm the Business Development Manager at Guesty. Thank you guys so much for joining us here. Today, we're bringing together as leader in the short-term rental industry to discuss how we can come together and try to really navigate through all of this uncertainty that we're facing today with the current situation. So before we get started, I just wanted to start off with a few reminders. So first, be sure to grant all necessary audio permissions so you can hear us. Whether you want us to, be in the background while you're working or full volume, just, make sure you can hear us. Remember that unfortunately we can't hear you, but not to worry, Zoom has thought of everything and has given us ways to try to communicate over this webinar. So if you look at the bottom of your screen, you'll see that you have a raise hand or a Q&A, and that's where you can submit questions. So we encourage you to submit your questions throughout the panel because we will have a Q&A session at the end. So if you hear something right away and want to ask a question, feel free to shoot it over and we'll do our best to get to it. And last but not least, which I hope will be reassuring to a lot of you, we're going to be recording the event. So please don't worry if something comes up with one of your kids or you need to take a phone call. We're going to be sending out a recording and a Spark Notes version, and that will be coming and could be found in your inbox. So don't worry there. So to start things off, I would love to give a big shout out to all of our panelists here today who are joining us. So first, let's start with an introduction to Tom Caton from AIRDNA, CRO at AIRDNA. Next, I'd like to introduce Anurag Verma, co-founder of PriceLabs. Then I'd like to introduce Marilee Carr, chair of the Short-Term Accommodation Associations. And last but not least, Jeremy Gall from Breezeway. Again, thank you guys so much for joining us. We're excited to have you here to really discuss how to, again, navigate and get through what we're all going through today. So just to provide a little breakdown of how this meetup is going to be structured. So first, I'm going to start with a bit of an introduction and a little intro to Guesty and some insights that we have on COVID-19. And then we're going to move to the panel discussion, which will be around 40 minutes, and it will be discussion led by AIRDNA, PriceLabs, STAA, and Breezeway on COVID-19's impact on the short-term rental industry. And then we'll end it with a Q&A session where we're going to be answering all of those questions you send to us, or really as many as we can, so that we can again come out of this really knowledgeable and confident. So to kick things off, for those of you who might be less familiar with Guesty and what we do, our mission is to really help streamline the complex operational needs property managers are tasked with accomplishing daily. Whether it be staff management, task automation, 24/7 guest communication service, right? Our platform provides a solution to really hone in on those key points that you guys face and save time and have the ability to grow. So our holistic approach is that Guesty is an end-to-end solution where we're a one-stop shop for OTAs, booking platforms, and again, also many different solutions within our software, whether it be a unified inbox, reporting, channel management. Again, it's a very robust software with many features. And part of that offering is also our marketplace, where we have, many vetted third-party vendors who have built great integrations, seamless integrations to Guesty so our users can build their powerful tech stacks and make sure that they have those tools for growth. So what's exciting is 3 of those partners are here with us today. And we have a lot of plans for the marketplace this year to continue to grow that. But again, enough about Guesty. We're not here to talk about Guesty. We're here to talk about what's currently going on and navigating COVID-19 and during this time. So what we've done here at Guesty is we've created a resource center for the industry. It's not necessarily just for our users, it's for really anybody who's looking for a comprehensive resource center that they can stay up to date with things and have a lot of different tools, tips, tricks, blog posts, updates, again, you name it, we have it, right? And be able to find it in one place. And the Info Center really focuses on 4 parts to really dealing with this crisis. So the first is mitigating impact. Yes, we are facing a worldwide crisis, and some of this is things that none of us have faced before. But again, mitigating impact is important because it could be worse. And so there are tips and tricks to do that we cover on our resource center that you can definitely access. The second, and again, the most, one of the most important, is just staying informed. I think we've all realized that every day something changes here, and we are constantly being again, updated with different news, whether it's our own cities doing different actions, the industry taking place and taking part in doing different things, right? There's a lot that's going on. And while we're all used to a really rapidly changing industry, this is, again, by far every day is something new. So we really want to make it easy for you to stay informed and keep on top of everything going on. The third, which we're going to hear a lot more about from Anurag later on, and who's the expert on this, which is pricing appropriately, because you still don't want to miss out on business potential. And that leads me to the fourth part, which is additional traveler personas, and they go hand in hand. So, again, our traditional vacationers, it's not happening right now, and all of us, right, are in our homes and, currently in lockdown in Tel Aviv. Hello, everyone, from my house, right? So, again, we're all facing the same experiences, but the thing is here is that we can cater to different personas to, again, try to find additional business avenues, because at the end of the day, right, we are still able to see different reservations come in different cities and different areas and in different formats than we're used to, but that still means that business can run, and we can, again, modify ourselves. And that's where, this resource center can help. So before we kick it off to the panelists, I just want to share just a piece of Guesty data insight that we think will be a little helpful in navigating here, which is, again, looking at average stay now. So before all of this, we experienced an average night stay of 4.5 nights. And now we're seeing that across the world globally, the average night stay has risen to 8 nights. And again, it's fair to assume here that this is due to a change in guest behavior. And guests are not looking for properties in order to go vacation. They're looking for properties in order to, again, get out of the city during their quarantine. Or, we have different essential workers who need to be closer to where they need to work, right? So really taking that piece of data and using it to modify our businesses just for this period. So again, we can still, find different avenues to do business and to keep hosting people in our short-term rentals. So finally, the part that I'm most excited about, the panel. We are joined here by a killer lineup. Again, just want to give a quick intro to Tom, Anurag, Marilee, and Jeremy for joining us, and thank you for joining us here today. So Tom, I'm going to hand it over to you, and let's kick this off.
Thanks very much, Shelley. Let me just get my screen shared. Yeah, okay, good. Yeah, so COVID Unpacked. It's been a frantic time for us in the data business, as everything that was interesting before is no longer interesting. AIRDNA as a company has spent our time building out predominantly data on the whole business, and particularly benchmarking has been something our customers have historically been interested in. But nobody cares what February looked like now. Everyone wants to look to the future and see what's happening in the summer and the bookings. So we've reoriented so much of the way we look at the world in our releases, and that's filtering through to our products as well. So AIRDNA, for those of you who don't know, we've been around for about 5 years, picking up data on short-term rentals and trying to analyze them to make of use to predominantly small-time Airbnb hosts. We have quite a few enterprise clients as well. So let's get into the data. So some of what I'm going to say is going to sound quite positive, but we're under no illusions. It's been a catastrophe, an apocalypse, a charnel house for vacation rental managers, for holiday cottages. There is almost no traffic going in. So before I get into being positive, let me temper that with, I know how hard it's been. We see the bookings come in or the absence of them. But let's try and look in this presentation for something that will be interesting. So this chart, it takes a bit of explanation. This chart was live this is data as of 3 days ago. So what we're looking at here is revenue through 2018, 2019, 2020, based on what was 2 days previously. So some of this is historical and some of this is looking forward. So here's what we see. So January, this is Airbnb revenue in the UK. January was a stormer, and this is much the growth of the platform as well as short-term rentals. But January was a stormer, $400 million. Sorry, it's in dollars. My American counterparts don't appreciate the pound so much. So $400 million in January versus 243 in 2019 and 163 2018. So February still way on top, but March we begin to see the effect of cancellations and the effect of the lack of the bookings come over. So as of this day in 2018, we can see in June, there was $140 million of bookings in the bag by this day. For July, it was 192 million. As of 2 days ago, there remained $210 million worth of bookings in the bag. Now, what does this mean? So this means people have booked earlier in the year. But what's a source of hope is what we're seeing on cancellations. So this chart is what proportion of reservations have been cancelled. So on the right it says completed. What it really means is intact. So, and this was once again live as of 2 days ago. So you can see at the beginning of the month, almost no cancellations, as you'd expect for this time of year, and generally with short-term rentals. And then you see the slow drive down into the beginning of April, where almost all bookings have been cancelled that have been previously made. But what's possibly encouraging, like I said, this is a grim situation, but we hang on to what we hang on to. This, you can say, reflects the sentiment of travellers as to what will happen in the future. And the sentiment seems to be from here that bookings in June will still happen. They have not been cancelled yet. That's not to say they won't be cancelled, but the people out there still believe generally their vacations are going to go ahead. So what's the positive news of this? Because we've all become amateur epidemiologists in the last few weeks. We've studied curves. We look at our predictions as to when our respective quarantines might end. I'm here in Barcelona and it's grim. I mean, just realistically looking at any measure, we're going to be another 60 days under lock and key here in Barcelona. So it's going to be difficult. So if I had this reservation 30 days from now, even if I haven't cancelled it yet, I almost certainly will in the future. But if we can take what we think will be the end of quarantine, having those bookings still existing can give you some hope that once the quarantine ends, people will come straight back to your properties. Okay, now let's move on a little bit to the difference between town and country. Because in the UK, London is its own force of nature and often has different rules from the rest of the country. And initially, we saw, if we were to look at this chart 2 weeks ago, we'd have seen bookings in London almost evaporate, as they do right here. So the chart at the top is showing, and this is one of the new modules we're pushing into our tool, so our prospective customers can see when bookings are starting to pick up. So the top line there is the amount of bookings that have occurred for the respective days in the last 60 days, the middle one the last 30 days, and the red one the pink one the last 7 days. So you can see right here, bookings have almost disappeared in London. And then when we look to the second chart, where we're just isolating that pink line at the bottom, these are reservations that have happened for different dates in the last 7 days. And I know Anurag is going to talk about this lately, but you can see it's all for the immediate future, that there's almost no reservations happening further down the line. But just look at these numbers. So we look at this April 11th, 10 properties have been booked for that day in the last 7 days. So what we're saying that, I mean, it's just atrocious. There's no better way of looking at this. On the Airbnb platform, for these properties, almost no bookings are happening. Now, there was a story 2 or 3 weeks ago about quarantine tourism. And Shelley mentioned that a little bit, and there's no denying that exists in places. But as I'm sure this, I think mainly a UK audience, you'll all well know there is a lot of social opprobrium attached to quarantine tourism that maybe there wasn't 2 or 3 weeks ago. So when we go to South Lakelands, this is the Lake District, the most popular part, includes Lake Windermere. So if you were looking to quarantine somewhere, this is probably an area you consider highly. Nice, isolated cottages away from the world. Well, what you can say is the bookings are at an equivalent with London, but similarly, that is almost no bookings at all. So you can see on, if we look at that similar date, April the 11th, I think that's saying there's 11 bookings, so just the same. So what was previously an opportunity in quarantine tourism is not there anymore. Okay, good news again. When we really look at the macroeconomic trends of what this could mean for the future, so one day we know this will pass and traveling will begin again. And the UK is an outbound tourism place. Millions of people travel from the UK to get their taste of sun. They go to Spain, they go to Greece, they go to Italy, they go further afield. If you look forward to 2021, it is extremely unlikely that will be of the same proportion. So when you think of those 65 million people in the UK, how many will be considering their next vacation when travel restrictions are lifted to be in the UK? This should mean an enormous macro trend of more holidaymakers looking to stay in vacation rentals in the UK. So when you think of the depressed towns that maybe not even my parents, my grandparents visited, my parents visited as a youth, to Blackpool, to Morecambe, to Whitby, to Scarborough, to Dorset, to Cornwall, those places we expect to be incredibly popular in 2021 and maybe even the latter end of 2020. The other macroeconomic trend to consider in all of this is that hotels will not be as desirable, we believe, as they have been historically. So when you think of a family holiday, when you have this fear that there's an unknown virus on the loose, a vacation rental is as safe a place as you can be with your family. You can be in control of the services, particularly if you believe the property manager is adhering to rigorous cleanliness standards. And I know some of the other panelists are going to talk about the heightened importance of cleanliness later on. So I think it's tough, really tough for all the property managers out there and all the owners out there. But if you can hang on, if you can get through these coming months, if you can, and you have to make your own decision whether to shutter your properties, how many bookings to take, that mathematical calculation you have to make based on your portfolio as to what it's worth doing. But once you get through, I have real hope that property managers in the UK will see a real boom. So stay alive, guys, stay alive if you can, because 2021 should be good if you can get there. Thanks so much, Shelley.
Thank you, Tom, for that insightful data that you shared with us. So, Anurag, I'm going to hand it over to you.
All right. Hoping everyone can see it. Cool. So Tom covered a great deal of important information about what the macro trends look like right now and what might happen into the future. What I want to cover during the next 10 minutes is in some ways what's happening right now, and if you're still open, if you're still open for business, what can you do from a pricing perspective, pricing strategies perspective, to to try and get through this period and salvage something out of it, right? So from that perspective, there are three broad trends that I'm going to look at. The first one is just we looked at how cancellations have happened and how they might happen for the future. What I will be focusing more on is what new bookings are coming in, what's the volume looking like, what's the lead time looking like, and what's the length of stay looking like. And like Tom was showing, this is not news to anyone. New bookings are far down. They're almost 80% down and more in some markets. We'll see some deeper data into that. Lead time is down 25%. This is actually for the worldwide data that we have. This number looked 50%. So it's not changed as much for UK, but it still has changed pretty drastically. We'll see that. And length of stay is up 2x. This is sort of backing up the data that Shelley was showing. So this is true for UK. This is true for the entire world, more or less, at this point of time. Now, in terms of raw booking numbers, we have tried to split it between cities and destination markets. And what we see is each date here is a booking date. So on 5th of February, how many bookings came in? This is across all the cities in UK, and this is across the destinations in UK, destination markets in UK. And you'll see that as time goes by, as February starts rolling in, there is some dip beginning to happen in the cities, not really as much in the destinations. And then March 11th is, I think, when a lot more stricter travel restrictions. I think we saw this worldwide, like pretty much every Western country decided around this time that, hey, we can't let travel happen anymore in some ways. So in cities, we saw a big dip. In destination markets, we are seeing a smaller dip, but then we have refreshed this data till the 29th. What we see is a much bigger dip is beginning to happen. And this might sort of back up what Tom was trying to say with it's just not being about it. There also being somewhat of a taboo around going to destination markets at this time and carrying potentially the virus to places where it hasn't been yet, right? Now, these charts, so this chart is fairly simple to look at. It's just the total volume of bookings coming in. This chart is exactly the same shape, if you see, as the previous one. What's different is the bars have been broken up by lead time. So if you look at the legend here, we have same-day bookings, which are in gray. Blue is bookings made 1 to 6 days out. Dark blue is 7 to 14 days out, and so on and so forth. Now, both in cities and destinations, we see that there was a big chunk of bookings being made for stays that were more than 7 days away. And this being spring, this is fairly normal. People were booking for the summer already. But since the quarantine, or since the impact of coronavirus became much more apparent, what's really happened is all the bookings that were being made for stays more than 7 days out, those are the ones that seem to have dried up. And this is happening both in cities and destinations. The bookings that were needed for essential and immediate travel, those still seem to be happening. So you'll see the gray and the light blue, they are reduced from what they used to be, but they still are noticeable. The other bookings that were farther out, they have just become such fine lines that it's hard to say that hard to distinguish between them almost. The third big trend we are seeing is again in length of stay. So this is the same chart, but now looking at percentages, like what percentage of total bookings was less than 3 night stays. So we are seeing that in destination markets, these are probably a lot of weekend bookings. The number of bookings that were less than 3 nights used to be pretty significant, and that has really dropped. And these 30 to 60 and 22 to 30 night stays, which used to be like these thin slivers up here, those have really started showing up more and more. If there is something good about this in some ways, it is that in this chart, we are looking at number of bookings. So although the percentage of number of bookings that are 31 to 60 days long is still pretty small. They cover a lot more days. So one 30-night booking in terms of occupancy gives you the same as 30 one-night bookings, for example. So even though the volume of bookings here is low, the number of booked days is actually pretty high. On the flip side, the longer bookings generally come with a pretty steep length of stay discount and a lower rate as a result. So in terms of revenue, it might not cover up everything, and even in terms of occupancy, it doesn't cover up anything. But this is a trend to be aware of. So from all the data that we saw, of course, there is going to be a lot more supply out there in the market because bookings aren't coming in, and previously the bookings that existed have already canceled. But if there is some demand coming in, it is for longer bookings and stays that are coming up in the next week or so. So from that perspective, what we've been recommending to our users is, first of all, go a little more aggressive than everybody used to on length of stay discounts. At this point, try and get as much revenue to stay afloat in some ways by getting monthly stays or weekly stays, which are not going to give you the same premium that you used to, especially because the market is very there is a lot of supply, and there are people who still need to travel for essential reasons, and it's great that they have options for travel right now, because in a regular tourism market they wouldn't have been able to afford it either, probably. The second is also, again, try and go a little deeper on last minute discounts. So at this point, from a pricing strategy perspective, for all our users, we are saying hold your rates steady for more than 2 months out, because we don't know what's going to happen beyond that. But for the next 2 months, our algorithms have automatically adapted to lowering the rates to make sure that given what's happening, you're able to attract whatever demand is out there. The next one is flexible cancellation policy. Part of the reason people aren't booking for the summer or fall is nobody knows what travel would look like or what the world would look like at that point. The few folks who are still booking, those tiny slivers that you saw in those charts, they will also not want to book anything that doesn't allow full refunds and cancellations, because they really don't know if they'll be able to travel. So if somebody is booking, they're probably going to try and book something that's fully refundable. And from that perspective, it's good to get some bookings on the books, whatever little is happening, even if they might cancel later on if the travel can't happen. But if it does begin to come back up, at least you have something already on the books. And then the last one is about fewer restrictions. If you used to have a fairly high minimum stay policy, we generally are recommending right now to try and reduce it. There are people, I showed that the percentage of shorter bookings has reduced, but it hasn't disappeared. So short bookings are still a fairly large percentage of bookings. So from that perspective, and given that they're only happening for the next week or so, it is okay to get those bookings. We usually have most of our users use settings where on a rolling basis, the farther out a date is, the higher the minimum stay would be, which holds even now. Like for the next 1 week or so, try and reduce your minimum stay as much as your operations would allow. Get whatever bookings you can, because even if they are short bookings, they'll get over soon. They're not going to block your days for. The hope is to get a 15-day or a 30-day booking. But even if you get a 2-night or 3-night booking, it's going to get over very soon, and then your calendar is still open for those longer bookings. The last thing I want to cover is a few additional resources that we've been putting up. All the data that I showed on the slides is available on our blog, and we can send these URLs later on. For our users, we are having regular webinars to cover pricing strategies as well, and there's a blog post about that. If there are any questions that are more specific, just feel free to email our support as well. And with that, Shelly, I'm done as well.
Thank you so much, Anurag, for sharing those really insightful tips on how to adjust our rate strategies right now. I just wanted to remind everybody that, whoever joined later, that there is a way right now to send questions. If you look at the bottom of your screen and you see Q&A, so you don't have to wait till the end. You can be submitting those questions whenever. So just remember that you have that. And now, without further ado, I'd like to hand it over to Marilee from STAA. And let me stop sharing my screen. There we go.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. I've struggled a little bit with this as it's a PDF, but hopefully everyone is able to see the slides in there. So first of all, just want to cover a slightly different perspective, in addition to being the founder and CEO of Under the Doormat. So obviously I understand all the pains that all the property managers are going through, because we're seeing that ourselves. But my main role and the focus here is that I chair the UK Short-Term Accommodation Association. Obviously, if anyone's not familiar with it, please check out the website. We've had tons of companies becoming members over the past couple of weeks, because there's never a better time than to be a part of an association and be working together to get the right government support for our industry. So I'm first going to start by some of the things that we're doing as the Short-Term Accommodation Association and representing the industry, and highlighting some of the conversations that we're having with government. So the key things that we've been looking at are the big issues that most companies in our industry are facing. So first and foremost, we wanted to make sure that people were able to pay for their staff, stay trading as businesses. And so one of the schemes that we heavily lobbied for was the job retention scheme. We actually lobbied heavily for something more similar to the Dutch scheme and what they've actually now introduced also in Canada, which would have allowed people to keep working during the furlough period. We are still in discussions about that, and they have moved a little bit so that people are allowed to do training and development, and also to do volunteer work, and we'll come to that a little bit later with our Nhs Homes program. But our view is that, companies are going to need all the preparation possible to come out the other side. And workers also need meaningful work. I don't think anyone wants to be sitting at home with absolutely nothing to do right now. So we believe that that's also important, not just for our industry, but across the board, in terms of mental health, keeping teams engaged, etc. But as it stands right now, at least what we have is the furlough program. So businesses that are impacted are able to furlough workers and obviously have 80% of their salaries covered by the government, which is a massive help to companies in the industry. The second piece is obviously access to credit, and it's great that they've announced all these loans. It's also good that there are revised views coming from the Chancellor around what does it mean to get access to these loans, because some of the banks were potentially rejecting lots of applications or requiring personal guarantees, all these types of things. So we've been working really hard to lobby for no personal guarantees, which at the moment they're saying that up to 250K in loans should be accessible without personal guarantees. And also that, any business which is a solid and stable business in normal times should be able to access these loans. So obviously that's another positive. I'm going to kind of go to the last one first, because I think one of the other things around access to credit, there are also the grants that are available. So anyone who is in the hospitality business, and that applies to most, should be able to access grants of £25,000. There are also business rates reductions. So there are a number of grants available in the UK now, thanks to not just us, but many other associations who've been presenting the case and trying to ensure that businesses have the cash they need to operate. We've been advocating for grants rather than loans because, of course, we all know in our industry that once a night isn't sold, you don't get it back. It's not like another product. So it's really important that through this period, businesses are, able to continue operating, able to bring their staff along and not have to lay people off, so that when we get to the rebound period, those companies are capable of operating. We wanted to also preserve liquidity. So this is a piece around providing vouchers or credit notes instead of refunds. Through our conversations with DCMS, that's been taken to the Department for Transport. There have been trails that they're going to change legislation to allow for this, but certainly that's really important. And as we say to them, it's a way to keep liquidity in the market at a time when that's critical. So that's obviously a position that we continue to have discussions with them on. And finally, the other thing is that the worst thing that can happen in these situations is then, consumers don't like the answer you give them or whatever, and they just go to their credit card company and do a chargeback. So we'd also like to make sure that we don't end up with cash drainage, lots of chargeback fights going on that it's difficult for companies to win. So some protection around drainage arising from chargeback mechanisms is another thing that we've been fighting for. So those are kind of the key policy positions, and as you can see, many of those things are now in place to some degree or another, and we're continuing those discussions with government to push those forward. We've done that in formal letters, policy papers, calls. We're also doing research out to all of our members, which is again why it's so important to have as many people as possible in the association, so that we can actually go back with stats about how it's impacting the industry, what we're seeing, and being able to help government see what support is required. And I think then the final thing we're doing, and actually in some ways one of the most important things, is that I think recently, and I think over the last year, our industry's come across a lot of criticism for taking housing away, for communities, and over tourism, and all these kinds of things. And in a time like this, all of our businesses are hurting, but we also have an opportunity to help. And I think that hopefully will, for all the companies and everyone in the industry that gets involved, is something that can be really beneficial in the long term. So what have we done? We've launched an NHS Homes initiative. We've got a pledge so that any company and hosts who provide free accommodation can be a part of this program. Everyone signs up to the code of conduct, because we want to make sure that for the NHS, who we're in discussions with, as well as government, that they know this is all being done in an altruistic way, and that this isn't, just a secret way to all start becoming commercial in a time when this is actually put out there to really help the needs of NHS workers. We already have, I think, about 12 or 15 companies that are signed up. We're adding new companies every day. And it's a really simple system where all of the requests from the NHS workers come into a central place. And then each company who's involved will get assigned, based on the homes that they have in different areas, different workers to place in their homes. And then everything is operated individually by the companies. So for a company, you don't need to give addresses or anything of your homeowners. That's all in your information. The system is just there to allocate those out. And if for one reason or another one can't be placed, it can go back into the system to get placed with another company. So really, really simple structure, so that we can get as many people who are NHS workers who need homes a place to stay as quickly as possible. What we're seeing are a couple of things. Number one is that it's people who have at-risk people at home. One of our first was actually an NHS worker whose wife was undergoing chemotherapy, and for all the right reasons doesn't want to be going home and risking that she would get infected. We've had people who have been relocated. So, they might have worked at a hospital up the road from where they live, and all of a sudden they've now got an hour-and-a-half commute every day. But to be honest, it's hugely humbling seeing all of the reasons and hearing their stories. And it's pretty incredible to get involved. What we've also seen is that our homeowners really stepped up more than we expected, and other companies have seen the same. It's been really almost surprising and so positive to see how many want to participate. And even we and other companies have seen that even deactivated homeowners that you might have worked with in the past are actually coming back and saying, I want to be a part of this. So, I think it's hugely important for us as a community to show that we can do good, that we can help. And we've got loads of companies, Laundry Heap, Air Linen, Marriott Homes and Villas is providing toiletries, lots of people getting involved and just saying, look, what can we do to support this cause? And so we really welcome everyone to get involved. And even though, of course, in the real world, a lot of us are competitors, there's no reason why we can't work together on an initiative like this. This is just a little excerpt of the NHS Homes page, which just talks about the free accommodation during the pandemic. Anyone can go there and say, I either need a home or I have a home or a portfolio typically. And we also have a section that if people want to donate to help to purchase, for example, we're needing first aid kits and things like that to be put into homes and things like that to make sure that all the health and safety is in place. So really just looking at how we can mobilize that. This is an example of the companies that are involved so far. And as I say, there's literally new companies joining every day. And, it's about coming together as an industry, offering support in a time of crisis. It certainly helps with government relations that they can see we're doing the right things. It's helping suppliers because we are able to charge at cost for cleaning. So it means that our cleaners who need this money to feed their families have work. It's engaging homeowners with long-term relationships. And I think it's helping everyone with brand reputation in a really, really difficult time. So that's kind of an overview of what we're doing as an industry and the program that we'd love for as many people as possible to get involved with. And yeah, look forward to questions later on.
Thank you, Marilee, for that, and also for the work that you and STAA are doing to unite the UK ecosystem in this time of crisis. It's fantastic. Okay, so finally moving over to our last panelist, which I'm sad about, but this means that it's almost over, right? So without further ado, I'm handing it over to Breezeway.
Thanks so much. First, we're excited to be here. Thanks, Guesty, for organizing this virtual event. And Marilee, I think that's such a wonderful initiative. We have an employee separated from his partner who's a healthcare worker in Boston, Massachusetts. Luckily has a place close by, but I mean, it's just an amazing initiative. So, so happy to hear about that and happy to see what we can do to be helpful as well. My name is Jeremy. I'm the founder and CEO of Breezeway. And I'm going to take a little bit of a different approach. Tom sort of teased this out for me early on, so appreciate that. But it sort of builds off of, one of Shelley's points, which was, how do you mitigate the impact? And actually, it also builds off something Marilee said as well. It's so important to think about, for mental health, how you can keep busy and keep working during this time and keep your teams working. So I'm going to take a slightly different approach, which is a little more on the optimistic side that, travel is going to come back, just as we've all said. The sun is going to shine after an incredibly challenging and difficult period of time. And what I want to focus on is, what can you do now? How can you think about what the future impact of this is going to be to your business? And there's one sort of overarching point that I want to point out, which is, I believe, and we're seeing this in the industry already, that the emphasis on quality and professionalism for vacation rentals is just going to be even greater. And people that can lean into that, that will turn into an opportunity to continue to distinguish your service. So we'll spend a few minutes talking about this as I sort of bookend the panelist discussion. So Breezeway is a company that's just fully dedicated to the future of property care and service. We've been doing this for about 5 years. We're a partner of Guesty. We work with 60,000 units around the world. And the idea is that, it's going to become more and more challenging to meet the expectations of your guests and your homeowners. And what's happening with COVID-19 is just a microcosm of this same push towards this quality experience. And I think, what we're seeing, point blank, is that it's going to be so critical as business returns to its prior pace that the hygiene of the physical space, it's just going to have this fully heightened role when we come back to business. Your owners are going to demand, we're seeing this already here in the United States and with some of our clients in Europe, they're going to demand more insight and confidence into how those properties are cleaned and prepared before they come back into their properties. And our hypothesis is, one of the things you're going to start to see first, sadly, we're all quarantined. We're not able to do this in person. So we're all staying at home. But your homeowners who are fortunate to have properties with you in their program, when they're able to move and move a little more freely about, they're going to be the first people who are going to travel this summer. They're going to be your first occupants as business returns, and they're going to want to make sure their properties are really clean and ready to go. And it's going to be top of mind for everyone. And sadly, the news seems to indicate that this is going to be top of mind for a few cycles. We're going to have a few up and down cycles as we push through this. So I think number two, guests are really going to gravitate towards drive-to destinations. I started a company called Flipkey in 2006. We went through the global recession in 2008, and everyone was pretty concerned about what the effects of that would be on travel. And I can tell you what ends up happening is people change their behavior. They go on vacation. They just decide, I'm sorry, airlines and cruises, they just decide they're not going to jump on the plane and cross the Atlantic one way or the other. They're going to get in their car and they're going to go to a drive-to destination. But they still go on vacation. And I think we're going to see the same thing here. And vacation rentals and holiday accommodation, holiday homes have so many qualities that actually make that so attractive. If you take a step back and you think about how you can position and use this not only to refocus on your operations, but a little bit on how you as you emerge from this, how you tailor your marketing to address this as well, right? I think there's an opportunity here to start to tailor your marketing and really emphasize that. Hey, look, a lot of our properties have remote check-in. You can use the key lockbox. You can do something. There's no public spaces. I really don't want to throw, hotels under the bus, but if you're thinking and you're going to be some of the first people to move again, vacation rentals are very well positioned and holiday cottages incredibly well positioned against hotels as we start to move and people want to have a little more normalcy back in their life. And I think we're definitely going to see that. So this sort of goes back to something that Mary Lee said. I think it's really important, and this, we talk about this internally as a business owner. We're all going through this together as a business owner in the vacation rental space. We're trying to focus on what we can do now to control the situation and focus our attention and our resources on that. And I think that's good advice for property managers as well. This is an opportunity to really revisit and dial in your housekeeping protocols and your operations. This has nothing to do with Breezeway, just for your own business. This is an opportunity to sit and think through how you're doing this, how you're managing remote work. How do your cleaning operations really work? Because one of the things that's going to happen is I fully expect this heightened awareness on cleanliness in your operation, that's going to create more downstream work. You're going to have more to do. You're going to have more frequent deep cleans. You're going to have to spend more time in these properties. So you're going, and sadly for many of us, we're going to have to do it with a few less resources. So you're going to have to be really efficient to eke out everything you can out of this, right? That's part of mitigating the impact, like Shelley talked about in the beginning. And I think auditing your property operations, understanding how you coordinate remote staff, that's a really key piece of how you can mitigate the impact and understand what's going on. And lastly, this teases out one of my next slides, but communicating and promoting the work you do, I think is just so critical, right? This is an opportunity. Those of us who have been around a lot of professional vacation rental and holiday home managers know that there's a lot of work that goes in to preparing a property in a professional manner. Sometimes that gets lost to the traveling community who might be finding these listings mixed in with individual owners who are marketing and self-managing. This is an opportunity to really shine a light on the hard work that is done as a professional to make sure those properties are really prepared, and leverage that to drive a wedge and say, hey, look, we take this very, very seriously. This is our job. This is what we do. We are hospitality providers, and we are making sure that when you come into a property, it is fully prepared for a fantastic hospitality experience. That is a very different experience from your typical, self-managed home. Now, there are great, some of these self-managed properties are incredibly professional, but this is what people are going to be looking for and what they're going to be gravitating towards. So a little bit of, we spend a lot of time working with people on exactly how their operations are done. I think you need to take a look not only at your protocols, but also how you're leveraging them. This is an opportunity to revisit how your cleans are done, really think through your deep cleans, supplement that with guidance from the authorities, pay very close attention. The first thing to do as you're thinking about this is clearly make sure your team and your staff is safe, that they're safe going into these properties, and that you can do everything you can to ensure their safety as you're cleaning and turning over properties. We have a checklist, and I know lots of people do. We have a resource center that has a checklist that's fully built out with tips and ideas about disinfecting high-touch areas. Whatever resource you're doing, I just encourage you not only to build these protocols in, but then promote the fact that you're doing that. I think that's the thing that's a little different in this environment now, is you have an opportunity to say, and I think people will welcome this in a way that's very unusual and different than we've done before. I've been on other virtual meetups where people are talking about including images in, I can't believe this, but this is the environment we're in, right? Including images in Airbnb, in your OTA listings that help indicate and provide confidence about your cleaning protocols. And actually add a new image to your listing to demonstrate that and put it at the back as people are going through your listings. That's the level. No one has ever talked about things like that before, but that's the level of attention that this is getting. And I think one way to mitigate the impact is to incorporate that back into your communication programs. This is just a small example, but texting guests, texting owners, over communicating to your cohorts of customers exactly what you're doing and why you're taking this so seriously to build confidence. This will help bring the traveling community back. And our position is we're encouraging all the managers that we work with and the industry to do this, because the rising tide is going to lift all boats here. And collectively, if we start explaining to people the work that goes in and that these properties are incredibly clean, ready to go, and they're safe, that will help bring us back to a normal pace as soon as possible. So just to end this, this is what we've been doing for a while. This is a common trend. This is just one more step in what we've seen about higher industry expectations. Marketing cleanliness of the properties is going to be the new normal. We hope that this passes soon. Again, I think in a few parts of the world, especially here in the United States, we expect that there's going to be these phases where it's just really tough to get out of this, and we're going to be back and forth. And I think we're going to be in a climate of really super heightened awareness on this issue for at least 12, 24 months. But adapting to these changes now, thinking about your operations, will help position you for the future. And if you have some time, think about that now. And this underscores the need for tighter operations. We're here to help. We're doing a number of things in addition to our resource center and meetups. If there's anything we can do to assist you, all these resources are widely available, but we're happy to help in any way that we can.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. And again, thank you, everyone. Let's share a screen real quickly. Thank you, everyone here on the panel for being here today and sharing your insights, your tips, and your takeaway action items that can help all of us navigate through the current crisis of coronavirus. So, what we're going to go into now is our Q&A session. So, if you have any questions, we've gotten quite a few, so we'll jump to it, right? But if you have any more questions, please send them through. We'll try to get to them. And we also wanted to start with a Q&A starter, which is how can we, everybody here on the panel, how can we help you? So, giving you guys some time to think about that. We definitely want to discuss that here, but we will start moving into the Q&A session. So let me start with the first question, and give me 1 second, guys. I just need to pull them up in front of me. So let's start with a question to Jeremy from Breezeway. So it says, hi, Jeremy, do you foresee authorities implementing a cleaning standard certification to be met by short-term rentals in the near future?
That's a great question. I don't think we'll see it from authorities, but I think this will take a couple of different forms. I think the first thing that will happen is, as part of increased regulation in the regulatory landscape, there will be increased pressure on a broader term than cleanliness. I think it will be around safety. And some of that safety might include really general cleanliness standards. But I think what we'll more likely see is local associations taking this seriously and setting up their own types of standards and really trying to help, raise the bar for their for professionals in their network.
Yeah, Jeremy, just following on from that, in the UK, we do have a program like that. So we have a partnership with Quality and Tourism, who runs the STAA accreditation. So again, you can go to the Short-Term Accommodation Association website. It's very inexpensive, and you get a badge at the end, which shows that you are accredited to UK standards. And they ran the Visit England scheme for many years. It's actually wonderful to go through it. My company's gone through it because you get a bit of coaching around how your standards match up to hotels and other bed and breakfasts. They look for things like consumer protection, health and safety, cleanliness. So it's a whole range of things. And it's great because that's going to give all the providers who are professional a badge, which differentiates us from the rest who don't have that.
Fantastic. Thank you guys so much. So for the next question, this one is for Anurag from Barbara Butler. Hi, Barbara. How you doing? So the question here is, what is the reduction in ADR as the bookings are getting longer?
Hi, Barbara. Great to hear from you again. I had a quick chance to sort of look at your question in the panel, and I dug in a little bit. And what I'm seeing in general is almost a 50% reduction. And this is not all coming from longer bookings. Some of it is just because longer bookings tend to have those monthly discounts and weekly discounts baked in. But it's also because just there is lesser demand, and property managers are being a little more aggressive in their pricing and reducing it to attract whatever guests come in. But more or less, we are seeing about 50% drop in ADR as well. The other thing, from anecdotal evidence, we kind of know a lot of our property managers are, the norm used to be like a 20 to 30% monthly discount and 10 to 20% weekly discount. Most people are going right now much more aggressive on that, because whatever little demand there is for, it's not even travel demand, it's accommodation demand. So most of it, I think Tom would probably know more about this as well. Most of the demand is coming from the same city for essential workers or people who just need a temporary place to stay while they look for a better longer term lease or something like that.
Yeah, thanks, Anna. I was just looking at the rates for London and just in our data, and surprisingly, the rate on offer is very similar to last year. The rate being booked, we see about 35% lower. I can only speculate that people have somewhat given up that, if there's no bookings coming through, maybe they're not using an automated tool like PriceLabs, and maybe they're not being as fastidious with updating their rates. Or there is always a school of thought particularly in hotel revenue management, that hold your rates and try and offer on other qualities. But it was curious to see those rates are about the same. Also see there's some other questions about who's still booking when we're in lockdown. It is an interesting one because you thought, well, there's no one traveling. How can there be any bookings at all? But as Anurag just said, there was such a myriad of uses for short-term rental accommodation. For example, the healthcare workers is the one often mooted, but all kinds of things come up. People want to be near their family. People have fallen out with their husbands or wives and need somewhere to stay. We actually, AIRDNA, have someone who's slated to start work with us on Monday, remotely, but they were moving to Barcelona and have not been able to take the time to look into searching for a full-time accommodation. And you know where there's good deals at the moment? Short-term rentals in Barcelona. So I think there's a ton of reasons still out there why people are still booking. Very little to do with vacations, but a lot to do with the facts of life. And these short-term rental platforms do provide an easy one-click avenue to find somewhere to stay.
Yeah, and I mean, on that, I think there's a question about, is the government going to shut down our industry? The conversations I've had with DCMS are that, they were considering it. And I think they may have had questions from other parts of the industry. But through the conversations, what we've been able to agree is that anyone who is a platform or that is accepting guests needs to be clear that it's for an essential reason, all the reasons that Thomas just mentioned. And as long as we act responsibly, they don't have plans to close us down. But obviously, if there would be examples of people flouting that and, having holiday makers or, advertising for people to do kind of like, tourism to rural locations and things like that, I think we would very quickly see that position change. So I think it's up to us as an industry to make sure that we're holding ourselves in check, doing the right things and only accepting that essential travel so that we can still take the few bookings that are out there.
Yeah, totally agreed. Okay, Marilee, I have two combined questions for you. We're going to do part A, part B. So first is a question from Sam Jones. And the question here is that he says, Marilee, we are a short-term let management company. We don't own or rent any of the properties that we host and work remotely, so therefore do not have any business rates or overhead, etc. Will we still be eligible for grants to help us grow and develop? So that was one. And then I think adding on is what are the grants and where can we apply? And that was a question we got a couple of times.
Yeah, so I mean, look, I'm not an expert on grants, so I'll just caveat all of this with the fact that there's some really great information available online. But what I can say is that The grants are not there for growing and developing your business. The grants are there for covering costs when this crisis is occurring. I mean, there are plenty of other schemes out there. There's EIS and other things which are, essentially government grants to support businesses for growth. What the grants are there for are essentially to cover business rates and grants for hospitality businesses. I think Emily asked a question as well, what criteria? I mean, each council is operating it. So you actually have to go to the council where your business is located and find the answers there. But what I have seen in some groups that I'm in is that those grants are starting to get released. Each council has their own time frame and approach, but I think the main thing is to make sure that you qualify under one of those groups of hospitality companies. I think if you don't have a physical business location, that's going to be harder because it is based on your location, your business rates, and what your rateable value is as a company in order to qualify for those grants. So I think that is a main criteria. That being said, of course, the loans don't have a criteria tied to your business location in the same way. So you might still qualify for a loan. And obviously loans are going to be based on your business plan and your recovery plan. So you might qualify for a loan to help your business grow and develop still. And obviously those may be available independent of what your situation is in terms of rateable value. So I hope that answers both of those questions.
Thank you so much. Everyone be sure to research that, send questions if needed about how to really see if you qualify for those grants.
One thing just to add is that the Short-Term Accommodation Association is offering 2 months of free membership, and there's tons of resources, and obviously the secretariat who are answering questions and trying to help people day to day. We want to be inclusive and help all the companies in our sector in this period. So please get in touch on the STAA website and kind of join the association, because I mean, there are updates going out to companies in the association almost on a daily basis about all these things, about the information, the links where you can find out more. So just get involved, because we're going to be stronger all working together.
Totally agreed. Completely agreed. Okay, this question is for Tom, and it's from Mehmet. Sorry if I mispronounced your name, Mehmet. And the question is, what if this issue continues until end of summer period? How should we property management companies plan the business further, as this means already going to low season, so to say?
What if this continues to end? Well, it's hard to know what the right response is. I mean, it really is low season to low season. I think if you're an optimist, you can think about pent-up demands, that if relaxations are relinquished, particularly as I talked about earlier, that there'll be more domestic tourism, then I think you could be hopeful that your low season will not be as low as other low seasons. But yes, that's right. I mean, you really have to try and conserve the capital to think that there will be no high season, and then low season may be slightly better. It's hard to know how this will unfold, and be ready, of course, for a boom time high season next year if the world manages to get its head over coronavirus. I don't know the perfect answer here, Mehmet, but yes, likely it will. This summer will be highly affected.
Yeah. Definitely, and we're all hoping that it doesn't go into the summer. We should prepare for always, worst case scenario, and a lot of what's on our mind, and how are we going to stay on top of what's supposed to be our high season that turns into a low season. Okay, so next is a question for Guesty from Rick. And the question is, which new technologies will arise after this COVID-19 crisis to help hosts run their businesses more efficiently, For example, keyless entry, digital key locks, remote access to hosts for guests. And Rick, you probably hit one of the most prominent trends that we're going to see at first, which is, again, right, minimizing contact between people if we can minimize it, right? So we're going to, have probably a little bit of recovery still, not necessarily social distancing, but keeping our distance from other people. And so keyless entry will be key for that. It's key right now for if you are being, if you are supporting essential workers and staying true to those terms, you're not allowed to be greeting them. So those are important for that. But some other trends that we're predicting that are going to come out based on research that we're doing right now is, of course, certified cleanings. Now, what this will mean is that you will have a list of probably items in your apartment that have to be cleaned, that have to be done, whether it's a certain product that has to be used, right? Things will come out more and more, and how we'll navigate before we have a vaccine, right? And cleaning will be a big part of that. And so tools like Breezeway, tools like other, operational focused tools that we also have on our marketplace will be key here to making sure that all of your staff is aligned to that protocol and that they're actually fully going through that list and executing it, because it will be critical for that guest experience. It will be critical for that. And I think the third trend that, again, it's probably hard to think about right now when we're not hosting, but is still that guest experience, right? Things are going to change. Guest experiences are going to change. And maybe upping that, those additional services to help the guest, be more comfortable in that apartment if they do need to be there for more amounts of time than probably before, meaning grocery services, welcome packages, right? Again, having extra sheets there, extra towels, things like that, making sure they have everything that they need. Toilet paper, right? That's the biggest trend. We have toilet paper in Israel, everyone, just shouting that out. But things like that. So making sure that you have all the right amenities that a guest needs and are really going to be catering to that guest experience. To make sure that it matches what the current status is, right? And I know that a lot of this is predictions, right? As we talked about before, everything changes on a day-to-day basis. So it's going to be, clearer in the next couple of months. We'll all have more data to go off of as well. But you can be rest assured that we'll be ready with those trends on the marketplace and within Guesty itself. Okay, so let's do a general question for everyone. We got some great questions here. So this one is to everybody here, and we'll start with Jeremy, and then and I'll go through there. So the question is, and apologies guys, here we go, found it. The question is, can we hear something about predictions on how supply is likely going to be affected by COVID-19 immediately after, and say 6 to 12 months out? What level of shrinkage do people anticipate, if any? So this is one for all of us. So thanks, Richard, for that. And I'm going to hand it over to Jeremy to start.
Great. Thanks, Richard. It's a great question. I've seen this from the flip key side, on the marketing side with my past company, and now on the operations side. And I think, this is going to, in the immediate future, I think as travel comes back, all those benefits accrue to professional managers and very much away from individual homeowners. I think you'll see a number of individual homeowners just sort of pull that supply from the platforms. I think this might be the end. Maybe this is the permanent end of shared space. I can't imagine in the short term, renting a room from someone else while they're sleeping next door in this sort of an environment. And I think it's going to probably take a while for that to come back to the public consciousness. And so I think that you'll see supply constrain in those areas. And unfortunately, there'll be some managers that will struggle to make it through this. So you might see a little more consolidation in the market, but I don't think we will see your typical inventory as a professional holiday rental manager and vacation rental manager. I don't think you'll see a lot of those homeowners pulling out of the program. I think they will stick with you, particularly if you give them confidence about how you're going to manage their property, do the asset protection, and make sure that it's clean when they want to come.
Anurag?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really tough question to answer. Even on the entire home front, we think there will be a little bit of supply dip, and we have already seen this with a couple of users where they have converted their short-term rental to a long-term rental. So they've said, hey, we got a 12-month lease, and given the environment, we are pretty happy to take that. So we'll be taking our property off market. And again, these are rentals by owners. So I'm not sure, and this is probably going to be, like Jeremy said, how each property manager communicates with their owners. But a lot of rentals by owners are probably thinking of mitigating risk either through like a 3-month, 6-month, or 1-year lease, just to make it through this period. So there might be a small temporary dip, but again, the anecdotal couple of users that I told about, they've both also said, yeah, once this gets over and their long-term lease is over, they'll be back in the short-term rental market. So it'll probably be back up at that point.
Hey, Anurag, yeah, I mean, it's to echo your sentiments. We were speaking with, I was speaking with Zoopla last week, and they were kind of obviously the property listing service, and they were almost, I wouldn't say chuckling, but observing with curiosity how many listings were coming from Airbnb onto Zoopla. But as they would point out, no one's renting long-term at the moment. So they're not leaving they're not leaving the short-term market to go in the long-term market. There were people just looking to get some income from anywhere. So what's going to happen to supply? Well, we'd really looked into this with reference to a general recession. It's something AIRDNA has researched before. Let's forget about the virus and let's talk about a recession, okay? Because maybe following the virus will come a recession. And we looked at this some time ago when Brazil had a small downturn. This was back 4 or 5 years ago. And what we noticed was an explosion in supply coming onto the marketplace. So if you think this through, you've got no money as a family. You've got a second home that you did not want to share with anyone else. Now you're sharing it. You've got a spare room in your house that you didn't want to share, but now you've got no money, so you're sharing it. People will maybe look to sweat their assets a lot more. But on the good side, we also looked at the way people behaved in a recession, and it was worse for hotels. You could definitely see a shift from hotel staying to private accommodation. So why would this be? Well, often it's more reasonable to share, to go to private accommodation versus a hotel. There are services the hotel offer that you don't really need. You could imagine companies looking to save money, and they'll say, why don't 3 of you go in a vacation rental and not stay in 3 different rooms at the Marriott? So you can see all manner of ways in which it can affect the accommodation market. And so forgetting about the virus, I think there'll be upswings in supply and demand if there's a general recession. And that's probably once we know where the virus is, hopefully in 3 months, and there's a stable state, restrictions on international travel, but life is returning to normal. I think there will be more supply. But as I mentioned earlier, I think demand will go up even more. So don't be scared.
Yeah, I think also from an industry perspective, it's really interesting because I agree with everything Thomas is saying that, the industry was kind of had a massive boost after the last recession, and that's when it really took off. And I'd expect to see something similar. But what we do see is that landlords who had moved from long-term rentals into short-term rentals are now seeing that there's a risk to doing that. And in many ways, that may actually be a really good thing for the industry, because if the landlords go back to doing long-term rentals, it allows some capacity in the industry for people who want to rent out their vacation home or rent out their primary residence. And it sticks a lot more with the spirit of the industry, which I think will help us to argue for more balanced regulation. So I think there certainly will be changes of supply, but I think overall that may actually be a really good thing for the industry.
Yeah, and again, I agree with the point that, I think it's a balance. I think you're going to see at first supply not be attainable, and then it's going to grow. And here, what we're also going to see is a difference in supply type as well, right? You're going to start seeing, first of all, companies move to different models as well, right? Not just focusing on a property that's only for 4 to 7 days, but even more so exploring different occupancy rates, bridging the gap even more so between midterm and long-term. That's our prediction. And again, supply will be even more flexible, and this idea of flexible living and choosing, if you're going for a stay in an apartment or if you're staying there for 6 months because you're on a business trip, right? So I think that's what we're going to start seeing with supply in the industry. But in the sense of, supply going down fully, that is not something, and I think all of us can agree that's not something that will happen. In fact, our industry is going to be even more desired than before once we're on the other side. So we are running, we're running out of time. And again, please feel free to reach out to everybody here to ask even more questions. We know we couldn't get through all of them. You guys sent in amazing questions, and thank you so much for being so engaged with us here today. We know it's hard to do virtual meetups. We want to all be together, but we can also come together here and share insights. So we're going to have more webinars and more resources coming to you on our coronavirus page. And again, thank you so much to all of our panelists, Tom, Marilee, Anurag, Jeremy. It was such a pleasure to be here with you today. And we hope to see everyone here at our next webinar. Stay safe, everyone. Take care.